Hi there and welcome to this my August wrap, in which I reflect on both the quality and the quantity of books I read this month. Now in terms of numbers, it was quite a productive month. I read 7 novels, 5 critical works, 1 work of history and 1 piece of life writing. So let's begin, as is usual, with the novels I read. These cover some 2 centuries or so, and I'll go through them in chronological order. So first up is Matthew Lewis's 1796 Gothic classic, The Monk. I absolutely love this book. It has absolutely everything. It's like reading a whole bunch of Norton anthologies in a single 400-page book. It's one of the richest literary texts I think I've ever encountered. It has ballads, folk tales, narrative poetry, dramatic sequences that rival Shakespeare in their intensity. It has stories inside letters, as one finds in epistolary novels. It fuses the English Gothic tradition with German high romanticism, and it also employs a battery of novelistic techniques. What a book! And on top of everything, it is full to bursting with sex, violence, and the supernatural. It's lost none of its force since the date it was published. I can't recommend it highly enough. Okay, the next 2 novels are by the same author, Sir Walter Scott. They are Guy Mannering and the Antiquary, published in 1815 and 1816 respectively, installments 2 and 3 of his Waverley series of novels. And of the 2, I found Guy Mannering to be by far the more successful. Also known as the Astrologer, a number of prophecies are central to the design of this Gothic novel, and these centre upon the destiny of Harry Bertram, the heir to an estate on the Scottish coast. He is kidnapped at the age of 5. The novel then jumps forward 16 years. Harry, now a man, has no idea of his true identity and is unwittingly drawn back to the place of his birth by a romantic relationship. This creates an extremely suspenseful narrative situation as Harry sleepwalks towards his destiny. The villains, who stand to lose everything if Harry's true identity is discovered, plot further evil deeds to do away with him, while the forces of good work, some of them openly, others behind the scenes, to protect young Harry from harm. The result is an extremely satisfying read which features some of Scott's most memorable characters: Meg Merrilies, the fortune-telling queen of the gypsies; Dandy Dinmont, the brave and loyal farmer with a liking for dogs; and also memorable villains, the devious lawyer Glossin and his foul-mouthed partner in crime, the smuggler, Captain Hatterick. I would suggest this is one of the best Walter Scott novels to begin with, and anyone who enjoyed Dickens' Great Expectations, for example, is sure to get a lot of pleasure from this book. The next novel in the Waverley series was The Antiquary, and I found this a crushing disappointment after Guy Mannering. There just isn't a compelling story here, and most of the characters are extremely flat, particularly the female ones. In fact, there are just 2 well-drawn characters in this novel. The titular figure, Monkbarns or Oldbuck, he's a pedant with a very satirical sense of humour, and the way he pokes fun at the other characters is memorable. And then there is the Gaberlunzie, the professional mendicant, Eddie Ochiltree. He is also a wonderful character, but there's not much else to recommend this book. It's perhaps for die-hard fans of Scott's works only. Okay, let's move on to the next novels. Next we have James Hogg's 1824 The Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner. This is a book which has attracted enormous attention from scholars over the years, and rightly so. It features 3 unreliable narrators, but more than that, almost every character within the story is also unreliable in terms of what they say, and that creates such a quandary for the reader. By the end of the book, you have been presented with so many different versions of what may have happened that it's impossible to weigh them against one another and come to any meaningful conclusion over the truth of what you've been presented with. A truly fascinating and unique book, and I do highly recommend this one too. Next up is Mary Elizabeth Braddon's 1862 sensation novel, Lady Audley's Secret. Now, I've already posted a reaction video to this book, link in the description, so I won't add much more here. other than to note that of the Gothic fiction I read this month, this is by far the weakest example. It's a page turner basically, and perhaps the most interesting aspect of this novel is precisely who is the villain. I don't feel, really, on balance, that Lady Audley did that much that was wrong. Okay, next. We jump forward now almost a century to James Baldwin's second novel, Giovanni's Room, and this features an all-white cast, something Baldwin was criticised for when he published this, and the central character is David, an American living in Paris, and he's reflecting upon the way he's basically not only destroyed his own life, but that of two other characters in the story. Giovanni, indeed, is going to his death on account of his reaction to the ending of a fling David had with him, and so that forms the substance of this short novel. I picked it up randomly during a book haul. I'm going to say more about it in a future video. I did enjoy it, but it was slightly overwritten and it did raise some ethical concerns. I think one point that is interesting is that Baldwin was criticised at the time because he should have just stayed writing about the black experience in the opinion of many of his fellow writers, and indeed if he was publishing this novel today, there is a similar cultural moment that we're living through that would see people also suggesting he should stay in his lane, as it were. Funny how things come full circle. Okay, next. Finally, we have Tsitsi Dangarembga's 1988 Nervous Conditions, the first novel to be published in English by a black Zimbabwean woman, and it's a semi-autobiographical account of her childhood in colonial Zimbabwe, or Rhodesia as it was then, and she sets herself the task of accurately representing the cultural, social, political and economic conditions prevailing at that historical moment, and therein lies, I suppose, my chief problem with this book, because as well written as it is, what value is there in this project? I know why critics and scholars love such texts, because you can extract the themes and have your hour-long seminar or your journal article on gender politics in nervous conditions or colonial exploitation in nervous conditions. But where is the art? There's no real poetry in this novel. There are no powers of invention being displayed. There is no real imagination, and for that reason I didn't really enjoy it that much. For me as well, the page count is a problem. In my view, for a realist novel to work, it needs a very high page count like this. New Grub Street by George Gissing, 500 pages or so. That's how much space a writer will need to present their picture of society in sufficient depth. Nervous Conditions is only 250 pages or so long, and hence it remains, even by its end, rather superficial. Okay, never mind that. Those are all the novels I read this month. Now let me briefly review the critical works. All of this reading centres on Gothic fiction, and that's because I'm about to take a course in Gothic literature, so I did all this reading by way of preparation. Okay, so D.L. McDonald's Monk Lewis, a biography of Matthew Lewis, published around the turn of the millennium. This is a very readable biography. Then Marxist historian Eric Hobsbawm's Bandits. This is wonderful. It's all about outlaws and the literature about them. I must have read this 3, 4, maybe 5 times over the decades. Highly recommended. Mary Mulvaney-Roberts, the Handbook to Gothic Literature, really well arranged. Individual entries on authors who wrote Gothic fiction and individual entries on themes found in Gothic fiction. And these entries are all cross-referenced, which makes it highly useful. Then Andrew Smith, Gothic Literature, a historical overview. And finally, Eve Sedgwick's Between Men, English Literature and Male Homosocial Desire, and I reread this for its chapter on James Hogg's novel, The Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner. Okay, one piece of life writing to go, then I'll nominate my book of the month, and it will be time, in customary fashion, to bid you farewell. The life writing I read was Dr. Rana Aldish's In Shock. It was an account of her experiences as a patient and the 8 years or so of serious illness she experienced. It's the subject of my most recent video, link in the description. Now I must nominate my book of the month, and for August it will be Matthew Lewis's The Monk. Absolutely marvellous. Anyone into the Gothic who hasn't read it yet, please do so. And now, as promised, I will bid you farewell. So, until the next time, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.